Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the vlog, episode number 22. We're not doing the intro from the car today. Instead, I'm at the studio of one of the colleges that I teach at. I'm starting to realize that working two jobs, being a husband and a father, and running a YouTube channel, way too much work. So I gotta squeeze in these intros and outros wherever I can, so a Wednesday afternoon lunch break seemed like the perfect time to do so. So, this episode you're about to watch took place on a Monday afternoon at Orange City Racing and Card Club. I had actually planned on going Tuesday to make an episode, and I had a buddy shoot me a text asking why there were 26 tables running on a Monday afternoon. I pulled up the app, and I saw that Orange City was doing another one of their huge high hand promotions where they were giving away like over $15,000 on that Monday. So I realized if everybody's there on Monday playing, nobody will be there Tuesday and it won't be worth going. So I took whatever was in my hands, I shit punted it into the trash, and I went to go play some cards. The last two episodes, I've had a real problem. It's been bet sizing. Had great ideas on how to play hands, terrible bet sizing to try to emphasize those ideas. So I haven't played cards in about a week. I've been studying a lot and reading a lot about bet sizing. So I'm hoping to go in there and improve that a little bit and turn this into a winning session. So let's get to it.
Before we get started, I just wanted to remind you I'll be doing a Q&A in episode 25, so go ahead and leave any questions you have for me in the comments below, or you can find me on Instagram at 7cardflushpoker and message me there. In the first hand of the night, there's a button straddle. We're in the big blind, and we look down at ace-5 offsuit. The small blind makes the call, and I decided to go ahead and put in a raise here. You viewers have been telling me that I should be playing these ace-deuce through ace-5 hands more aggressively, so I raise it up to $20. Under the gun then shoves for $155 total. It folds back to me, and this player was talking about how his ride was leaving the card room and he needed to go, so he could be doing this kind of light. However, I only beat like 3 ace-x combos, and there are 8 ace-x combos that beat me, not to mention I'm way behind anything like 5s through 10s. So I end up folding. My opponent's nice enough to show me he had ace-10 offsuit, so it was one of those spots where I would have been crushed. We're in the small blind this time, and now it's our turn with ace-10 offsuit. +2, the low jack, the hijack, and the button all call. So when the action gets to me, I raise to $15. Probably should have raised a little bit more. The big blind tanks for close to a minute, and then re-raises to $45. It folds back to me, and I don't want to call and play this hand out of position. This player has raised every pot since he sat down a few minutes ago. If he's doing this light, I can apply some real pressure. Plus, I'm in okay shape against 8 through 10s and even jacks. So, with all that in mind, I decide to go ahead and shove for 156 more. He tanks for almost another solid minute and then lets his hand go. After talking about it with him, it sounds like he actually folded ace-queen offsuit, and I think I got the better hand to fold here. We're on the button this time with jack-9 of diamonds. There are 3 callers, and when the action gets to me, I raise to $15. The low jack and the hijack are my only callers, so we're off to a flop 3 ways. The flop is 3-3-5 rainbow, and the action checks through, so we're off to the turn. The turn is an 8 of diamonds, bringing in a diamond flush draw. The action checks to me, and I decide to go ahead and bet out for $15. The hijack is my only caller, so we're off to the river heads up. The river is a king of diamonds, so now I've made my flush. My opponent once again checks it over to me, and I announce a bet of $40, and as I'm starting to put it together, he says I don't have to count it out, and he mucks his hand, so we win. There's another button straddle. We're in the cutoff with ace-10 offsuit. We're playing 7-handed, and everybody makes the call. So when the action gets to me, I put in the squeeze for $30. I've got a medium strength hand, and I have position, so I want to raise it up and charge people, but one by one, they all end up folding. However, I collect an extra $30 without having to see a flop. We're on the button this time, and we look down at jack-9 offsuit. There's one caller from early position, and the hijack raises to $10. I'm the only caller, so we're off to a flop heads up. The flop is 10-king-3, so I flopped a gut shot straight draw. My opponent leads for $20, and with my gut shot, I'm going to go ahead and make the call and see a turn. The turn is an 8 of hearts, so now I have an open-ended straight draw. Once again, my opponent leads for $50. This really feels like an ace-king type of hand, so if I call and I'm able to hit my river, I don't think he's going to see that coming. So with that in mind, I go ahead and make the call. We're off to the river. The river is a 7 of hearts, so I make my straight, but there is a flush on the board. My opponent, however, slows down and checks. I have about $180 in my stack, and I think a jam is just way too strong as that's going to commit almost all of his chips. So I sized down a little bit and bet $110. My opponent thinks about it for a little bit, and then he makes the call. I show my hand, and he mucks, saying he put me on ace-king. So, if he put me on ace-king, and he called my river bet, did I just crack aces? We were in the small blind this time, and we looked down at pocket eights. There's one early position caller before the hijack raises to $11. The button makes the call, I go ahead and make the call, as do the big blind and under the gun. We're off to a flop. The flop's a pretty good one. It's 8-5-3 with 2 hearts. I check, and it checks all the way around to the button, who leads for $50. It's back on me, and this is where I decide I want to go ahead and put in a raise. With the heart draw out there, I want to make sure I'm charging those draws accordingly, so I bump it up to $150. It folds back to the button. He is not happy with this move. It's the same opponent from the last hand. He asks if I'm open-ended or if I have some sort of flush draw, but then he eventually mucks his hand. We're in under the gun when we look down at ace queen of clubs. I'm going to open the action here for $12. The small blind is my only caller. Same guy I've been battling these last couple hands. We're off to a flop.
My nemesis.
The flop is 3-5-8 with 2 clubs, so not a bad flop. It checks to me, and I go ahead and c-bet for $15. My opponent calls. We're off to the turn. The turn is a 10 of diamonds, so it doesn't change too much. My opponent checks, and I decide to go ahead and slow down and check and take a free river. The river is a blank. Once again, my opponent checks to me, and so I'm not going to win this hand by checking, and I decide to go ahead and fire out for $35. My opponent thinks. He says at this point he's just donating, and he tosses in the call. I show my hand, and he shows ace-king for the better ace-high, so he got a little bit of his money back against me. We're in the big blind this time with ace-10 of diamonds. There was a button straddle that I didn't notice, and so when the action got to me, I raised to $10 thinking I was actually opening the action. The button is the only caller because it's a min click, so we're off to the flop. The flop comes 10 high with 2 spades. I lead out for $20, about a pot-sized bet. My opponent makes the call. We're off to the turn. The turn is a 3 of spades, so it brings spades out on the board. In this case, I'm not too concerned about him having spades, and if he does, he'll let me know through his actions, so I bet out for $35, about a half pot size bet. My opponent doesn't think too long, and then he folds. There's a button straddle. We're in +1. We look down at 8-9 of clubs. The small blind folds and the big blind calls. When the action gets to me, I bump it up to $20. Only the button straddler calls, so we're off to the flop heads up. The flop is 6-7 queen rainbow, so I'm open-ended here. I go ahead and lead out on this flop for $30, and my opponent min clicks me to $60. Now, I didn't quite realize it at the time, but I'm getting about 4-1 to make a call. But if I do call and don't hit my card on the turn, I'm just not sure I can get him to fold anything. Partially because he's still upset about the fact that I rivered that straight with Jack-9. So, with that in mind, I decide to fold and try to wait for a better spot. I know, it's a really nitty fold, but you can't win all of them. I've already gone runner on this guy. He's been involved in every hand I've been in since then, and he's obviously repping a really strong hand. This isn't a terrible spot, but there will be better. In the very next hand, we're under the gun, and we look down at ace-king offsuit. I open the action for $13, and I get 3 callers, so we're off to the flop 4 ways. The flop is 10 Jack-king with 2 hearts, so it's a very wet connected board. When the action checks to me, I decide to go ahead and overbet the pot, and I bet $65. And all of my opponents fold. Could I have made the bet a little bit smaller to try to keep an opponent in there? Possibly, but with such a wet connected board, I want to protect the strength of my hand. There's another button straddle. We're in the big blind and we look down at pocket 2s. The small blind calls. I go ahead and make the call. The hijack calls, and then the button raises to $10. We all make the call, and so we're off to the flop. The flop is ace deuce jack, so I flop bottom set here. I decide to go ahead and check when it gets to me, and the action actually checks all the way around, so we're off to the turn. The turn is a 9 of diamonds. It brings in a diamond flush, but I feel I really missed some value on the flop. So when it checks to me, I decide to go ahead and lead out for $25 on this turn, but they all fold. There is another button straddle. We're in the hijack with pocket 7s. The big blind calls, +1 calls, and when the action gets to me, I bump it up to $17. The big blind is my only caller, and he only has about $30 behind, so we're off to a flop heads up. The flop is 3 Jack King Rainbow. The action checks through, and so now we're off to the turn. The turn is a 7 of clubs. Once again, my opponent checks. I throw out a bet of $15 trying to get him to commit his stack, but he folds. In the last hand of the night, we're in the small blind and we look down at Ace King suited. The player in under the gun raises up to $5 and there are 3 callers. When the action gets to me, 5 isn't going to be enough, so I bump it up to $30. Only the cutoff calls, and so we're off to the flop heads up. The flop is King 10-6, so I flop top here. When the action's on me, I lead out for $55. My opponent looks like he wants to call, maybe with some sort of draw, but ultimately he ends up folding. I noticed the table was starting to get a little bit tight at this point. We were starting to lose some of our action players, so I decided to just go ahead, rack up, and book a really solid win.
Well, that sure felt different. What a great session. You know, I've watched the last 2 episodes and I realized the big hole in my game is my bet sizing. So I've been studying a lot on that and really feel that I put a lot of pressure on people tonight with good, healthy sized bets. Got some folds, maybe even when I didn't need them, but nonetheless, scooped a lot of pots in our direction. You know, obviously had a little bit of run good, going runner to get straight early. And I think I flopped or turned 3 or 4 sets tonight. So, you know, there's definitely some run good too, but man, I just feel like I played so much better and I needed that. I needed it for my confidence. I needed it for this channel. So pretty good night. In the game for $240, out for $560. And I did it in a little bit less than 2 hours. Not a bad night. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more poker content. And you can follow me on Instagram at 7cardflushpoker.